Well, good morning. On my end, it is early. I just had to drop my middle schooler off at school. So on the parent side of life, I am missing elementary school age children already. It's been pretty fun, although so much more busy now that my daughter's in 7th grade and involved in all the things. I am constantly a chauffeur for her, but I'm excited that she gets to do stuff, which is awesome. So she's in track, cross country, and she's in a musical, and she's in horseback riding lessons, and it's just constantly on the go. So some of you with older kids, you probably already know all about this. Anyway, on my mind for today in this little car thoughts drive is that there has been back kind of in the talkosphere of education community as we've come back to school, renewed conversations and renewed debates online about the role of words like excellence. Who gets to define that? We've been talking about concepts like auditions. We've been talking about concepts like honor choirs and ratings for choirs, and any attempts to set up hierarchies where some choirs are better than other choirs, and or some singers are better than other singers, and there's a school of thought, I guess, that you could say that's evolving, that all those things should just go away. And the reason that all those things should just go away is that, as I understand it, I'm trying to steelman this position, meaning give it the best intention of the people who are putting forward this position. But the position seems to be that if we get rid of all those hierarchies, then people will just flood in the doors of all the choirs, because what's been holding them out is not feeling like they would be good enough to be in our environments, because they're so elite and so elitist, that by having the audition, or by having the hierarchies, by having the merit-based systems in place, that we are keeping people away. And of course, I completely reject this. I think that is actually the opposite of true. And I choose the opposite of true as on purpose, instead of saying false. Because when I say the opposite of true, I think that it would actually have the opposite effect as what those people are describing. I'm actually going to have a guest on soon that holds this position, and we're going to discuss that. And of course, like all the things that are contentious on the Choralosophy Podcast and people argue about, we're not going to argue about it. We're just going to have a conversation about it and talk through some of the issues that we disagree on. And I think this will be an important conversation coming up. But essentially, my premise, just so I can kind of have it on the record here for you before that conversation comes a few weeks from now, is that one of the things, the flaws in that argument, I guess you could say, is that it assumes that everyone in the world comes to a choir rehearsal for the same reason. And I've actually heard that comment and seen that comment and that argument made, that we're all there for the same reason, and that's, love and joy and community and all those things. That's not why we're all there. That's first of all, there is no single variable that defines why any group of humans does things. Humans are way too complicated, especially in our motivations. That's an Enneagram thing, actually. You can, of course, that doesn't make it science, but it's a good way to understand that this concept is so complicated, is the Enneagram. To look at the Enneagram and understand motivations for many, many behaviors are multivariable. In other words, you could line up 20 people, they could all do the same thing, in this case, sing in a choir, and there could be 20 different reasons that they're all there, okay? So understanding the vastly complicated nature of humans is really important. First of all, to swallow the bitter pill that you can't understand why all the people are there. You can't understand, especially until they're there and you've had a chance to get to know them individually. Okay, so the reason this blows up the idea that if we just all were to make choir one way, which is unauditioned, no merit-based system at all, It's just anybody who wants to sing should just get in the same room and sing all the time would be more inclusive, because people would then not feel intimidated, and then our numbers, like I said, would just swell and we'd have way more kids in choir and adults, and everybody would just be singing at that point if we had no auditions. Of course, that's not true. There are some people who choir, I'm going to say this, and it will be so controversial, choir is not for everyone. Choir is not for everyone. Music, in fact, John Rutter said this when I was talking to him. I didn't even ask, it didn't even prompt him in this way, but I asked him why choir was so important for the world. And he very quickly shut me down, and he said, no, it's music that's important for the world. Choir is just one kind of music. And I was like, yeah, okay, obviously, but I didn't think of it in those terms. And he's exactly right. Choir's not for everyone. Some people should play in the band. Some people should play in the orchestra. Some people have no interest or even any light going off in their brain by making music. Not all people are wired musically in the same way. The people who want to make music on a regular basis are special people. We should be treating them like special people, like they have something that other people don't have, which is this desire to be in a room with other people making music. Not everyone has that desire. Okay? So should we be expanding and giving more opportunities all the time? Yes, of course, sure, absolutely. But the idea that it's for everyone is not true. Some kids want to play soccer. They want to spend all their extra time playing soccer. Good for them. Okay? So there's a difference between being inclusive and including everyone, because those aren't the same thing. Okay? There is the personal choice of the people involved, right? They get to choose too, and some people won't choose us, no matter what we do. So back to the concept of setting up a policy for your choir program, which my position is that there is no one way to set up a choir program. There is room for everybody in our different philosophies of how we set up a choir program. There is room for expertise as the jazz choir guy. We need that person and or people. There is room to be an expert in setting up a show choir program. Okay? There is room for setting up a choir program that is quote unquote traditional. Okay? We need all those different types of programs. It's not a one size fits all model that would work in every town, in every community, etc. Okay? And the reason that matters as a concept that if we're going to talk about as a professional organization or as a profession generally, what do we support? What do we advertise for? What do we push for in our communities? We should be pushing for, it's none of your business. That's what we should be pushing for. It is none of your business whether or not the choir in the high school next door does an audition setup or if they do a self-selection setup. That's none of your business, because they see their kids in their environment and what it needs. You don't. Okay, so that's important. That's important. First of all, that there are lots of different ways to do this. And so you will find that on this platform, the position will be that I support you. If you decide that, I'll shout out Adam Paltrowitz. He's a big advocate for self-selection. And he's been on the show. We've talked about this. It works for him. Great. It wouldn't work in my situation. Okay? They're completely different schools. I've got 280 kids on my roster. I can't let them self-select because they would all pick the same class. And once they start all picking the same class, then obviously the guidance counselors aren't going to let all 280 of them be in my concert choir. That's not going to happen. Okay? So what they would start to do is the guidance counselors would then choose which kids were in each class. So that's not self-selected at all. That would become guidance counselor selected. So in my situation, it's either I choose, the kids choose, which then by default would be that the guidance counselors are choosing, at which point the guidance counselors are running my choir program. That's not going to happen. Okay? So it's teacher selected, meaning I hear them sing before they come into a class, and I determine at what level is their current musical knowledge and aptitude, so that I can find a place for them within my program that is appropriate to their current level. so that they can come in and not be lost, but also be challenged and have opportunities to be a leader. Okay? So the reason I don't mix in, for example, beginners and advanced kids is I want my beginners to start to be leaders on day one. If I put them in with my advanced kids, the advanced kids would by default be the leaders. And that's my philosophy is I don't want that. I want the beginners to learn to be leaders amongst themselves so that when they are advanced later, we have a culture where, and in fact, I say this in my classroom a lot, how many kids does it take to sing one voice part? The answer is one. So we try to get over this idea of, well, there aren't enough people singing my part. Well, how many does it take? It takes one. Ah, okay, right. So if everyone is sick from my section today, does that part just not happen? No, I'm here. I can do it. Right? That's the attitude. It takes a while to get there, but we want to get there. Okay, so I have that philosophy for a reason. It has nothing to do with excluding people. It has nothing to do with keeping people away. It has to do with putting people in a position to be successful. And in my situation, that results in lots of kids. Okay. So one of the issues that I have with this argument that singing in a program that strives for elite choir status or excellence in the rehearsal and or having a top choir, quote unquote, is that this will keep people away. And in my situation, it doesn't seem to be happening. How many high school programs? I'm not the biggest high school program in the country, but I would have to say if we were going to look at this on a statistical basis, how many high school choir programs have close to 300 kids in them? I don't know. I mean, it's not a high percentage of high school programs that are that size. So who's being kept away? Obviously there would be some kids, and this is the crux of the argument that again I'm trying to give it its fair play here. But there would be some kids that don't come to my high school choir program because they see that it requires an audition, and I would never know that I've kept them away. I get that. But here's the problem. What about the kids that if we were to switch our model tomorrow, that would quit? Because the environment is no longer one where they get to be in a choir that they've worked really hard to be in to get to a certain level of skill so that they could rehearse a certain way at a certain level, and now all that is gone because everybody's got to go back to square one. Some kids would quit, and I might not ever even know why. They might just quit and not have the guts to say it's because I don't want to go back to square one. I've been in choir for 2 or 3 years. I can sight read anything at an adult level, and I don't want to go back to learning what quarter notes are. Which we would have to do if we had beginners in the class. We'd have to go back to talking about key signatures. We'd have to talk about what it means to make a vowel. What are overtones? What is resonance? What is breath connection? These are the concepts that I teach in my beginning class that makes it go slower. Okay, because I want them to all understand without somebody creating a representation, a demonstration around them. I want them to have that chance to do it themselves without any older kid doing it near them. Okay, so that they have a chance to do it independently. And some kids don't want to go back to that. One of the more beautiful and exciting things to me about being in arts education is that it has the capacity, if done really thoughtfully and really well, and this is just my opinion, where we can deliver an education that is both full of objectivity and subjectivity at the same time. This idea that I've been kind of discussing, and in fact it took a second drive for me to finish these thoughts because this is very complicated, and I really do think that it is at the crux of a lot of our music education philosophical divides, is that there is a push against objectivity. Okay, that the idea of objectivity itself is being kind of torn down. Okay, now of course that is just sophistry. I'll just flat out say what I think here. To pretend that there is not, that because humans cannot be perfectly objective, which is true, that the pursuit of objectivity is therefore not worth our time, or a folly, or a fiction. It'd be kind of like saying that because it's impossible for there to be a world of perfect freedom, that we shouldn't pursue freedom, or that it's because it's not possible for there to be a world free from disease, we shouldn't pursue health. Right? These are silly sophistry ideas that happen within philosophy. They get thrown into our educations in college a lot, and I just think it's silly. It's silly. So arts education has within it, it's very, very easy to defend the claim that we have parts about what we teach that are objective and some parts that are subjective, and I think that's awesome. So, examples. A choir is either in tune or not in tune. That can be measured. Okay? In fact, you could measure it with Voce Vista. Shameless plug. You can buy Voce Vista with my promo code. You can measure this, and you could also measure objectively whether or not a singer is singing a pure O vowel or a pure A vowel. And it's pure depending on whether or not the overtones light up and have a singer's formant at the top. That's objective. Now, it doesn't mean that it's morally better or gives the singer more human value when they do it. It's just either it's that or it's not that. Okay? So for example, I teach my choirs based on a lot of scientific principles of sound and acoustics that you can measure in Voce Vista, for example. So when I'm teaching a choir, I'm wanting a very overtone rich, very pure vowel, singer formant rich sound. That's what I go for. There are a lot of choirs that don't. Fine. That's fine. In other words, if you are in a jazz choir medium where you're using microphones and the vocal production of each individual singer is not going to be overtone rich because you're singing into a microphone, where you're going to go through some type of a digital system where that doesn't matter anymore. Okay? My choir could be really excellent at doing what we're doing. Your choir, your jazz choir, could be very excellent at doing what it's doing, yet the two things are completely different. To me, that's great. And I actually am kind of baffled that these things are becoming arguments, right? So the idea that because there is no one objective standard of what a great choir is, that somehow we jump to the conclusion that there is no standard of what a great choir is, or shouldn't be. Well, no, there should be, but it's like we can hold in our mind these concepts that are abstract that I'm describing right now, where somebody could so easily just listen to one of my choirs, for example, and say, "Oh, wow, that's pretty amazing at what they're doing." Right? Their goal is clearly a set of principles, right? And then listen to another choir that's completely different. Using a show choir, for example, I could use a show choir that their sound is going to be completely different than mine because they have different goals. Their goals are not maybe all the same alignment of all these acoustical properties and using those scientific concepts as a way to express the art form, right? Because that's what my classroom is. That, like, we talk about those types of how science and art interact all the time. That's what we talk about. In a show choir, maybe they don't. Maybe they talk more about, and I don't know because I've never taught show choir, I'm just riffing here, but maybe they talk more about the storytelling element, the expressive element, the body movement, right? What part does my body moving here on this beat or whatever, how does that add to the overall picture to what I'm singing, right? So maybe there's other things that they're talking about. To me, that could also be excellent, yet completely different than what I'm doing, right? So I think these are intuitive things to people. In other words, I don't think I'm saying anything right now that should be controversial at all. I think the part that is a little bit contentious on this topic is that that I am willing to say out loud, there are excellent choirs, and then there are choirs that are not excellent. I'll say that out loud. To pretend that that is not true, to me, is very childish. Okay, now, that being said, that doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. Okay? It doesn't mean you have to go to the choir that is trying to do, let's put them in the category of my type of choir, where those are the types of things you're doing. You're focused on music literacy, you're focused on what would have its roots in a bel canto style singing, which is based on like the overtone series and based on vowel formants and all of those things, breath and body connection, resonance all the time, that type of singing. Let's say though, and because that's kind of what my classroom's about, and let's say you're trying to do that too, great. But maybe you're not as far along as doing it as I am. Okay, I would have two choices of how to interact with you. I could say that you suck at it, which I wouldn't, or I could say, I see that you're trying to do what I'm trying to do. Maybe I'm further down the road, let me help you. Okay, but implicit in that is the implication that my choir's better at it than yours. So the F what? Who cares? Like, where is that? And I think that's the root of all of this, is that it's whether or not it's a competition. Because in my mind, it's not. I get up every day going to school, driving there like I am right now, trying to figure out how to make my choir better. That's what I do every morning. And in my opinion, that's what you all should be doing. That's what you all should be doing. Driving to school every morning, trying to figure out a way to make your choir better, regardless of what your rubric for better means. As I've described already, there could be so many rubrics for this. But if your rubric is similar than mine, I'd love to help you. In fact, I could probably be, just like you all could, able to shift, because we all have this capacity, to plug out one rubric and plug in another one for different situations. Happens in my classroom also all the time. We do a pop show at the end of the year, where suddenly our rubric becomes a lot more like a show choir's might be. That's fine too. I think ultimately this is a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, in that we have to make these proclamations of moral purity, where it doesn't feel good to us to say things like there are choirs that are not as far along the road. Therefore, it's best to just say that all choirs are the same. They're all just as good. Every sound a kid makes is just as good as every other sound. And of course, that's not true. And if that idea were to become prominent, my opinion is actually that we would start to all lose our jobs. Because most of us teach in schools, where if there's no way to measure good versus bad or progressing versus not progressing, and again, I don't use words like good or bad in my classroom. We use technical terms and the consistency with which a kid does X, Y, Z. But without those things, if we can't document that students are learning, then it's not too far after that they figure out that they don't need us. Okay, because the goal of a school, the function of a school, is that kids are learning. Okay, and if the function is that they're learning, there's going to have to be some way to measure that. Now, if you're someone who doesn't believe that should be the function of a school, I think that's a separate argument, and there's probably some validity to some of those concerns, and I'm interested in having those conversations. But ultimately, I think and I'm at school now, so I'll kind of wrap this up. So the premise of this whole conversation, and there's a blog kind of attached to this with some examples, is that I think we need to be better at this conversation in general. Meaning, I think we need to acknowledge that there is such a thing as mastery, excellence, virtuosity, inspiring levels of achievement. Those things matter, because those ultimately are what inspires a lot of people to come to our art form, is they see themselves as like, hey, I want to be really good at that too. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean that we exclude or kind of kick out of the party the kids who come to us that have no skills yet at all in what we're doing. You can create a program, and I think my program's a good evidence of this. A program that takes in beginners who have never done choir before ever in their life, all the way to kids who are able to sight read anything at an adult or professional level, heading out the door on vocal scholarships, all of those elite Western classical exclusionary concepts, right? They can do all those things, and you can have all that. It doesn't have to be an either or. It can be a both and. And that's where I would like to continue to drive this conversation on this platform. My position will always be that the people that are pushing for the more kind of inclusive, less objectivity, more subjectivity and spirit, body, mind connection type ideas, that we could do both of those things. I really believe that we could, and whether your center is around Western classical education or something different, you can still do these things. None of this has to be an exclusionary idea. So whenever I see someone post things on the internet about inclusion, if they use words like instead of, or we need to replace blah, blah, blah with blah, 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 that's not inclusive. That's exclusive. When you're wanting to replace something that some people hold dear with your thing, that's not inclusive. All right, have a good day, guys.